three speakers, as I said. Ryan is a member of Extinction Rebellion. He also works as an environmental officer for one of the councils in London, and so he's on top of the science, and he's on top of how air pollution works. And so he's going to start off, to be followed by Stuart and then David. So Ryan, over to you.
Hi everyone. If I haven't met you, yes, I'm Ryan, and thanks for having me along. I wouldn't say I'm an air pollution expert, but I thought it would be useful to, we're going to have some great discussions later, but I thought it'd be useful just to go over very quickly the kind of different types of air pollution that there are, just to let you know main ones that we watch out for when it comes to pollution from vehicles and that kind of thing. So it might help a bit with this discussion later on if we do that first. So I'll just quickly run you through it so you can get on to more in depth. So I'll just share my screen with you. I can make this available to you after, but I'll show you the websites I got this from. Some very good websites you can get all this kind of summary from. So our air pollution.
Ryan, sorry to.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Okay. What if I move a little bit closer like this? Is that better? Hello?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, I just, trying to share my screen. How's that? Can you see that slide now?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we got look at that. So there's two useful websites that are really good to get an overview of air pollution issues and basic science and things. So these cleanairhub.org.uk and londonair.org.uk. And I can send this around later on, or next time we do a newsletter as well. So let's get straight into it. Carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, tasteless, and odorless poisonous gas. It's produced by incomplete combustion of fuel. So the more inefficient that an engine is, the more carbon monoxide will be produced. And it seems to have reduced in our environment past few years, mainly due to engines becoming efficient, and that's some change in the design of engines. They estimate that road transport's responsible for about 90% of UK emissions of carbon monoxide, and therefore the highest concentrations you're going to find are always going to be closer to busy roads. So if you're trying to avoid this pollutant, obviously the further you move from the road, better. And actually what they find is that even small differences in distance make a very big difference to the amount of pollution. So even walking one side of a footpath as opposed to the other side can make a difference. So also badly ventilated domestic fuel appliances like gas, oil, or solid fuel can lead to high indoor concentration, as can smoking. Carbon monoxide affects the transport of oxygen around the body by the blood. So breathing in low levels can result in headaches, nausea, tiredness, difficulty in thinking clearly. So exposure to high concentrations can kill, but that would almost never happen outdoors. That's the kind of thing you hear about when people get trapped in a room with carbon monoxide. So nitrogen dioxide is one you'll see a lot when you're talking about traffic pollution. There's a group of gases called nitrogen oxides. You might see NOx written sometimes, NOx. So road transport was responsible for about 50% of the total nitrogen oxide emissions. Again, so the highest concentrations are near busy roads, large urban areas. Gas boilers in buildings are also a source. It's lots of evidence to show that it's harmful to health, causing respiratory symptoms like shortness of breath and coughs. It inflames the lining of your lungs and reduces your immunity to lung infections like bronchitis, etc. More pronounced effects with people with asthma compared to healthy individuals. So that the levels of nitrogen dioxide, they've not fallen as quickly as predicted in London as they hoped. Apparently, that's largely appears to be the result of diesel cars creating more nitrogen dioxide than was anticipated. Now, nitrogen dioxide also reacts with hydrocarbons in the presence of sunlight to create ozone, which is another thing to talk about. So when you have sunny days and you've got lots of traffic, that nitrogen dioxide will react with sunlight to create another pollutant. Oh, it can also contribute to formation of particles. I think I've been through that. So yeah, it produces ozone when it mixes with sunlight. So ozone's really formed by human activity. It's formed when that NO2 reacts with the sunlight, and you might have heard of the ozone layer. We think of that as a good thing, but that's way up high in the atmosphere, very high in the atmosphere, and that protects us from UV light from the sun. But ozone that's down near the ground level is harmful to our health, and it causes lots of irritations in your lungs. Southeast of England is the highest concentration of ozone in the UK, mainly because it's closest to European pollution sources, apparently. Okay, and an interesting fact is that the ozone pollution tends to be highest in the countryside and in the suburbs, but that's because of the urban areas having these other reactions with that chemical at the ground level that creates something else. So it causes irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat. Can lead to coughs and chest discomfort. Often, if you're walking around on a sunny day near traffic, that irritation that you feel is often from the ozone. Let's go into that. Particulate matter. So that's one you'll hear about a lot. You might hear about PM10 or PM2.5. So particulates are little dust particles and literally little pieces of matter or liquids suspended in the air. Particles could be from the brakes, from cars, from the emissions from vehicles, little bits of metal and rubber and the roads themselves, especially when there's braking happening. So when you have lots of traffic that's moving slowly, lots of braking and stuff, you get lots of brake dust as well as stuff from the road surface. The problems occur when the particles are very small. So there's PM10 that can often get stopped, maybe if you're breathing through your nose, for example, or with this, some kind of filter. PM2.5 can get much deeper into your lungs, cause much problems. So those PM10 are very small particles, and PM2.5 is even smaller still, and that can cause the worst health problems. Sulfur dioxide, colorless gas with a strong odor. There's not much of that anymore because it's mostly due to coal burning. So that's been reduced quite a lot. And I think that's about it from me. We can move on to the discussion if you like, or if you've got any questions.
Ryan. Yep. Thank you very much. Now we're going to try and get out of Ryan's screen and get back to where we are. There we are. Right. So thank you very much, Ryan. So now Stuart Christie is the next. He's representing here the Stop the Silvertown Tunnel Coalition, which is a coalition of organisations which has been campaigning along with Extinction Rebellion Greenwich to stop the construction of the Silvertown Tunnel, which is being planned by the Mayor of London. He's also got a lot of experience, and he's been doing that for many years, I should say. I mean, that campaign was going for years before Extinction Rebellion Greenwich existed, before Extinction Rebellion existed. And Stuart is one of the people who's been working on that issue for a very long time. He's also got experience in monitoring pollution and so he's going to talk to us now. So Ryan, that's it. Yeah, there he is. Off you go.
Yeah, I'm Stuart Christie. I was originally involved in the predecessor, the North to Silvertown Tunnel campaign, which started back in December 2012. When we started out, we didn't know how to tackle the project, and one of the obvious things to look at was air pollution. So we set about trying to get data, and this was at a time where air pollution wasn't really on the horizon for too many people. And we found out that Greenwich Council had actually been doing some decent monitoring since the late 90s with things called diffusion tubes. Now these are small test tubes that go up onto lampposts into areas you want to monitor, and they stay up for about a week, about a month at a time, 4 weeks or 5 weeks, and the dates are mandated by DEFRA. And the reason is that if different people are doing monitoring in different locations, having a consistent set of data and a consistent set of dates really helps to compare and contrast against different areas. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you. So these are little test tubes. They go up onto lampposts and the openings at the bottom. And what they do is they can measure the ambient air over the course of those 4 weeks. And at the end of the time, they get capped and sent off to a lab, and the lab analyzes them and comes up with a figure for NO2.
Stuart, if you think you've shared something with us,
yeah,
it hasn't worked. Well, I'm seeing you, but
there we go.
Now it looks like it's.
There we go.
There we go.
That's
there
the
we
one.
are.
I have to hit the last button here. So why NO2? Well, NO2 is quite easy to measure, and it's a good proxy for all the other pollutants that are in the atmosphere. It's only relatively recently that machines have become available and at a lower cost to be able to monitor things like PM pollution that Ryan was talking about. But NO2 itself is an amazing proxy for everything else that's going on in the atmosphere at the same time. And there's a wealth of data available back to the 90s. So as you can see, we managed to get some data out of Greenwich Council. They publish the broad overview all the time, but they don't actually give you the raw data. So we managed to get the raw data out of them by FOI, and we had a look and we mapped where the worst pollution was in the area. And actually, believe it or not, everyone suspected that it was going to be down by the village flyover and near the tunnel approach. And actually, the worst pollution was actually down by Plumstead Station.
Stuart, I'm just going to break you in for a second. When you say FOI, you mean that you got that information by FOI? That's a Freedom of Information request to the borough, right?
It is indeed, yeah. It's a Freedom of Information request to the borough. They were 28 days to answer, and they're meant to give you all the data that they have. So we set about looking at Greenwich initially, and then started putting in requests to other councils around the area, around London, and some do and some don't monitor pollution. So you can see here the worst result in the borough was down by Plumstead Station. I had a period mean of 77.34 micrograms per cubic meter. Now,
Stuart, I'm really sorry. I'm going to interrupt you, and I hope I'm sure for the last time. Just a couple of requests here to speak a bit more clearly and
yes, no worries, sir.
Distinctly. Thank you.
Okay.
And slightly louder. Thank you.
Okay, I will do that. Now, the EU, with the Clean Air Directive, have set a limit for a mean every year of 40 micrograms per cubic meter. And as you can see, certain areas of the borough were almost double the legal limits for pollution. And when you look a bit closer and you look at the data for 1 month, which I think this was in May 2013, this was from the borough's own monitoring stations themselves. And you can see in black, those are the really bad areas. In the red, they're over the legal limit. If they're orange, they're approaching the legal limits. And if they're green, they're fine. Now, what the council monitoring tends to do is it tends to choose a few locations, like this one that's 17 over here, which is Shrewsbury House up on the hill. And they use that to monitor the background NO2 away from roads. So there's something to base the figures on. So we set about and we thought, well, why don't we do some of this ourselves? So we found a supplier for the £7 diffusion tubes, and we did our own monitoring across the borough. The first one we did in 2013 was about 30 sites, but by the time it came to 2014, we actually tried to tackle a far, far wider area. So we went into Bexley, we went across to Lewisham, we went up to Newham. And these are the results for January 2014. And as you can see, there's a horrendous amount of areas that are over the legal limit. The blacks are some of the blacks that are horrendous. The reds are not very good at all, and we only found 2 greens and 2 kind of safe limits. Now these are the kind of things that that you can do yourself easily, actually. And the other benefit of trying to do things by the mandated deferred dates is that you can actually use your own monitoring and combine that with everyone else's. So the council does monitoring. If someone puts in a planning application, many of them have to do environmental impact assessments, so they have to monitor on the same dates. And you can suddenly build up and collate a lot of data, or going back many decades, to actually see how the trends are changing over time. I'm just going to unshare the screen. Give me a second. So these are these things that can be done by anyone, and these are the kind of things you can actually empower communities to do for themselves. So if we can set about and raise some funds to do our own monitoring, what I would like to do is, after all this coronavirus lockdown is over, try to set up some comparable monitoring inside the borough, and even into a wider area if we can, and compare how things have changed. The last time we did any monitoring on our own through citizen science was back in 2015, and I'd be very interested to see what has happened and what's changed now in 2020. So after this meeting, I'll share my details, or I'll share my details in chat very shortly. And if you're interested, I would love it if you could get on board and we do some of our own monitoring and try and get the latest data at the council to see how things are changing.
That's it?
Is that okay? Yeah, I think so.
Fantastic. Yes,
Yeah.
no, thank you very, very much, Stuart. And sorry for interrupting. Just people were struggling to hear you a little.
Yeah,
and that's one of the frustrations of using this format. Okay, so now our last speaker we're really pleased to have here. And it was the Silvertown, our friends in the Silvertown Tunnel Campaign who put us in touch with him. It's David Smith, who represents an organisation called Little Ninja UK, and that organisation was set up to campaign to protect children in London from the effects of air pollution. And David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Smith. I'm the founder of Little Ninja UK, as Simon said. It's an organisation or a campaign looking at reducing children's air pollution exposure. I should say I'm from London, but the campaign is actually nationwide. I live in Putney, Wandsworth, on West Hill, which is the A3. And about 3 years ago, I found out that due to the level of air pollution my children are exposed to, I've got a 5.5-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 7-month-old baby. By the time they're 8 to 9 years old, they're looking at somewhere between 5% and around 13% reduced lung volume. Now, for me, that's just ridiculous in terms of how that's just kind of accepted that that's what our children are facing. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of children in London who live in these areas. As Stuart's just shown, how many areas were above the 40 UGM-free, the micrograms per cubic metre for NO2. Well, King's College London have done a wonderful experiments over time and studies. And one was based over 5 years of going into schools in London, measuring lung volume, and then actually tracking it over the different years. And what they found was that children who lived in areas just above, on average, above 40, which is the legal limit, 40.7 was their thing as an average, had a reduction in lung volume of 5%. So you can imagine what that means then from what Stuart was showing you, where it's 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, you know, this is increasing. So more and more children are having this reduced lung capacity. So, you know, I kind of uncovered this myself purely because I was standing at a bus stop on the South Circular Road, quite close to where I live on West Hill. And there was a coach idling next to my son. And gong, 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 you can hear the engine going. It's like, oh, okay. And then it kind of drives off, accelerates this plume of kind of gases, and then the air kind of cleans up a little bit as it drives by. And then 50 seconds later, the lights turn red. An articulated lorry stops next to my son, wheels bigger than he is, exhaust level with his face, and the lights aren't going to change for another 50 seconds. And it's just these fumes pumping out. And I'm thinking, well, I can smell them, but I'm up here at 6 foot. You know, my son's down at, you know, less than a meter height, 3 feet. And suddenly it kind of clicked for me. It was like, hang on, that can't be good for him. And once I started investigating, I think many people have found the same thing. You just kind of pull back that first layer and it is horrific. You know, there's huge amounts of information around the damage this is doing to everybody, but it really is from cradle to the grave. In fact, it's before, it's from conception, it's from pregnancy. Whatever mum is breathing, it's getting into, you know, they found it in the other side of the placenta. So, you know, the baby's getting it as well. And they've realized that actually the impact it's having on the unborn child, we're talking low birth weight, premature birth, and all of the medical issues that come along with that. So as I started discovering this, I thought, okay, well, I've got time in life. I can take a few, you know, take 6 months and really focus and see if there's anything I can do to help with this problem. So I kind of invested, I got myself an air monitor. I started off looking at diffusion tubes, realized actually they're only going to give you an average over 24 hours. Very good in terms of what Stuart was saying. But in terms of what I wanted to know was what it was like at the bus stop at the time I was there, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning. So I got an AQ mesh. I contacted universities. They said, get an AQ mesh. It's the top of the range. It's what the mayor is now using for the Breathe London campaign. I got one, measured pollution inside my house, measured it just outside the house, measured it at the local bus stop, at the nursery, at the primary school, and horrified. Similar to results that Stuart showed at home, actually very low, particularly when you're opening up the windows, you're ventilating, you know, use your extractor fan when you're cooking and so on and so forth. But actually, near our bus stop, double the legal limit. Outside our school, 50% more than the legal limit. Outside the nursery, 75% above the legal limit. And by the time I got to the South Circular Road, you know, it's double the legal limit. But interestingly, at the time I and my son were using the bus, it's actually not just 40 or 80 or 100. At times it was 200, 250, 300. Because actually, when we look at this average figure, it's taking the peaks and it's taking the troughs. It's including what's happening at nighttime where there's very little traffic, and then averaging that over with what's happening during the day. So it comes out at what you're seeing, the 40, 50, 60s. But when you just look at the time our children are traveling to school and to nursery, these peaks are massive. They're looking at above 200. Now, the World Health Organization says above 200 is a toxic gas, no human exposure. And yet that's what our children are breathing. Now, I kind of thought, well, what can I do? You know, it's such a difficult one to look at. And I thought with this information, so I shared this information with the council, I shared this information with TfL. I kind of explained to them, well, actually, I looked at the research. It says that an idling vehicle produces twice the emissions of a moving vehicle. So we kind of starting to understand that when you have these areas where there is traffic idling, then air pollution is actually increasing, which is why we see more air pollution outside, you know, next to traffic lights or at junctions or outside train stations where you've got lots of vehicles parked and idling. You know, what can we do around that? So is there something we do, say, at bus stops? So I contacted TfL and said, okay, look, could we have a keep clear sign at bus stops? You know, just simply hold the vehicles over there until the lights change and then drive past. We already use keep clear signs. Could we do that? And they said, that's a great idea. We're going to trial it. The mayor said, yep, we're going to trial it. And then 6 months later, they said, actually, we're not going to trial it because drivers won't know why they can't idle next to bus shelters. And to tell them why would cost a lot of money in the communications program. So I said, well, you get 300 million from JCDecaux for advertising at bus shelters. How about taking some of that money and use it to protect the people who are using the bus? Because obviously we want to encourage more people to use the bus and get out of cars. Let's make it safe for them to do so. And they said no. But, you know, it's up to TfL. It's their structure. It's their roads. So I thought, okay, we're not going to win that battle. The petition's still there. You know, we've got over 1,000 signatures, but, you know, there's another good idea. How about we tackle idling in traffic? Now, an interesting one that I found out was, I always thought that if you had to start an engine, when you kind of turn that key and you start an engine up, it takes up a lot of fuel and creates a lot of emissions. But strangely enough, the science now, and peer-reviewed, actually says it's around 7 seconds. So restarting an engine is equivalent to around 7 seconds of idling. So when you have vehicles idling for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and we're concerned around turning off and then restarting the engine, actually, after around 10 seconds, you're actually causing less emissions by turning off and restarting than you would if you just continued idling. So we said to ourselves, okay, well, outside where I live on the A3, it's a 3-minute journey from Tibbetts Corner, if anyone knows it, down to the South Circular Road. And actually, at the moment, it's taking about 15 minutes to make that journey during peak times. And my question was, well, if it normally takes 2 minutes or 3 minutes, what's happening for the rest of that time? Could that be the reason why there's so much pollution? And I've looked at the details from the monitor, and the answer was, well, actually, yes, because every time you have an accelerating vehicle, it's using huge amounts of fuel to move tons of weight a few feet forward, and then you brake. And when you brake, you get, as Ryan was saying, this kind of tire wear, brake wear, road surface wear, this particulate matter, PM2.5, little bits of rubber, oil, metal, plastic, because as dispatches showed, tires made out of plastic. So all this stuff is kind of coming up into our air, into our lungs. And then, of course, the vehicle accelerates again. So another plume, and it's around 10 times the emissions every acceleration. And then when it brakes again, it then idles. And obviously, we know now from TfL that an idling vehicle produces almost twice the emissions of a moving vehicle. So we have all this evidence telling us that actually the bulk of the pollution is actually caused by the way that our cars are being driven, the unnecessary idling. And INRX say about 180 hours a year a London driver spends idling in traffic. So again, it was like, well, are there opportunities where we can to actually ask drivers to stop, turn their engines off, wait until the section of road clears, and then continue their journey? And, you know, we mentioned that again to TfL, had another meeting with directors, and they said it's a very good idea. We did something similar for the Olympics. It's called gating traffic. We said, brilliant, can we do it on Westhill, give it a trial, see if it works? They said no. They said it's not an urgent thing to do. So, you know, it reaches that point where you're looking for things to do. So Extinction Rebellion from Wandsworth got in touch and said, can we help? And so Clean Air Day, they came, they blocked the A3 with myself. We handed out cake, we handed out leaflets like this with information on the back to drivers, and, you know, spoke to drivers, explained how, you know, change in behavior could make a difference. And funny enough, the 3 lanes of A3, after more campaigning, has turned to 2 lanes, and the lane next to the bus stop is now a bus lane, so that's great. Now, coming up to the end of my time, I did want to just slightly touch on one last bit, which was a No to Idling campaign, if that's okay, Simon? Yeah? Okay. So all of this was actually saying, can we reduce the amount of fossil fuel being burned? Because obviously this is about air pollution, it's about climate change. These are 2 sides of the same coin. They're intrinsically linked. So I said, okay, well, what's the kind of no-brainer idea that we can get? They're not going to do the bus stops. They're not going to do this, the stopping traffic. Can we ask them to do one simple thing, which is stop vehicles idling when they're not driving, like outside a hospital, a GP surgery, a nursery, or a school? And so we said to them, okay, there's a law that says you can't idle, but it's not being enforced because the Department for Transport say, don't fine drivers. just speak to them, give them 2 to 3 minutes or 5 minutes to turn off their engine. And if they don't come up again, tell them you're going to find them. And obviously they'll switch off or they'll drive away. So in places like Richmond, 10,000 people have been spoken to and only 1 fine has ever been issued. But the problem comes that people know they're not going to get fined. So the next day they come back and they idle in the same position. And then you have to contact the council have to come down, they have to speak to them, give them about 2 to 5 minute grace period. And eventually that person switches off their engine, so no one gets fined, so behavior hasn't changed. So basically what I'm campaigning for is a no to idling, NO2 idling. It's actually saying that change the law so that anyone who's caught idling gets information on air pollution, information on climate change, information on the impact on their own health, because it can be very high inside the car, their passenger health, and the impact it's having on children. And just to touch on that, when I say impact on children, is we measure air pollution up at a kind of 2 to 4 meter height. We're breathing at a kind of 1.6 to 1.8 meter height. Our children are breathing at a meter height, and babies in buggies at a 0.5 meter height. NO2, CO2, all these pollutants are heavier than air, so they stay near the ground. So our children are breathing much higher concentrations, and they breathe 2 to 3 times more rapidly than we do. So relative to their body weight, they're actually breathing high concentrations and higher volumes. And of course, their immune system isn't developed properly until about 6 years old, and their lungs and their brains are still growing. And this stuff impacts lung growth and brain growth. So it impacts on IQ as well. Lots of information, lots of research on that. So, you know, I'll come to the end and maybe we'll pick this up in some of the discussion. But what I'm looking for really is to, in the same way I got this fantastic support from XR Wandsworth and XR Merton, who came down and stopped traffic and actually said to people in our community, look, we're here to help you, not just tackling climate change in the future or climate change in other countries, but here right now, air pollution is impacting on you. The same thing, because with this no to idling, particularly outside schools and nurseries, we're finding out that it's the mums, it's the children, it's the pregnant mums. 90% of the people on the school run are mums. What I found from knocking on windows, and I've knocked on hundreds of drivers' windows, 90% are men in their white vans or in their trucks and their lorries and their minibuses and so on and so forth. And so we're asking our most vulnerable, our women and children, to confront men in order to actually, you know, so there's all this work around social inequality, you know, sexual inequality and so on and so forth, and climate justice that really needs to be tackled. So, you know, we're really looking to get a little bit of help from Extinction Rebellion to say, actually, can we support this campaign? We need 100,000 signatures. We've got about 3,000 signatures so far. So when you get time, please do type into Google NO2 idling, no to idling, and you'll see the campaign on change.org and as many signatures as we can get so we can actually start putting a bit of pressure on the government to change the law. We'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you very much, David. One of the annoying things about this format, I want to say that, one of the annoying things is that we can't clap, and I'm sure we would have, well, we can, let's go for it. I just want to give a round of applause to all our speakers who've shown different aspects of this problem, so thank you so much.